When you became leader of the country, you spoke a lot about addressing white-collar crime in Ireland, but we haven't seen much progress on it yet. Recently, we unearthed yet another example of NAMA breaking their own rules, when, almost like magic, they sell loans belong to Oireachtas with 352 million owed on them back to the original owners, conveniently through a shell company in Luxembourg that was conveniently structured to facilitate the deal. Now, how did your government deal with it? You reward it. Oireachtas have been given 25 million to build and make more money. The CNAG announced last week that he had sought further information on this loan sale, and he may begin an investigation. I wonder why his office is the only one that seems to have any appetite to seriously hold NAMA to account. Sadly, Taoiseach, I don't think your government has done so, and sadly the Gardaí have failed to do so. But Taoiseach, today I want to focus on a different area of white-collar crime. You might remember back to May 17 and the case of former Anglo CEO Sean Fitzpatrick, one of the most expensive cases in the history of the state. It collapsed due to the inadequate investigation by the Office of the Director of Corporate Enforcement. The ODCE were then asked to do a report explaining the collapse of the trial. The report has been with the Minister, Heather Humphreys, since June 17, yet has not been published due to legal advice. I've seen the report. It's a whitewash and doesn't address the issues regarding the mistakes made by the ODCE during the case. I have here, Taoiseach, the transcript of Judge Aylmer's statement from the 23rd of May 17, when he had no choice but to acquit the former Anglo CEO due to the ODCE's botching of the investigation. The judge was scathing of the ODCE, and when you compare the judge's transcript to the internal investigation by the ODCE, it's clear that the ODCE are covering up their own mistakes. So we have a white-collar crime agency responsible for uncovering crime, are instead covering up themselves. It would be hard to make it up. Taoiseach, on the 23rd of October, the Law Reform Commission published an 800-plus page report into white-collar crime with over 200 recommendations. One of their main recommendations was the establishment of a corporate crime agency. They even drafted the bill. Taoiseach, will you bring forward this piece of legislation immediately and start an immediate wind-down of the ODCE? Secondly, have you read the ODCE report? And thirdly, are you concerned that the ODCE have submitted a report to government that is in essence a cover-up of their own mistakes? And how can we have confidence in this organisation?
Thank you, Deputy Wallace. Taoiseach.
Deputy, I haven't read the report yet, nor have I seen it, nor has it been brought to Cabinet, so I'm impressed that you have. But I imagine you'd come to your conclusions about whether it was a whitewash or not before you've read it. I will read it, and I'll form my own opinion on it once I have. I am advised by Mr Humphreys that the report will be brought to Cabinet this week or the week after, and will be published thereafter. You'll recall that back in November of 2018, we published a package of actions that we are taking as a government when it comes to cracking down on white-collar crime. It was entitled Measures to Enhance Ireland's Corporate, Economic and Regulatory Framework, Ireland Combating White-Collar Crime, and that was launched by me and the former Taoiseach and Minister Flanagan around this time last year. There are 28 actions which we're taking to crack down on white-collar crime. They're very much underway. One of the key actions in the package is establishing the ODCE as a standalone company law compliance and enforcement agency. And that's the direction of travel in terms of policy, taking it out of the Department of Business, Enterprise and Innovation, making it a standalone agency in its own right that will be better equipped to pursue cases such as this. There's also been additional resourcing for the ODCE. An additional $1 million is provided for them next year to strengthen the work that they do. And in terms of legislation, we've signed into law just back in July the Companies Statutory Audits Bill and also the Shareholders' Rights Directive will be transposed into law by 2019. And you'll be aware that just before the recess, we passed the Criminal Justice Corruption Offences Act. So as you can see, a lot of legislation being put in place that needs to be put in place, additional resourcing for the ODCE, and our plans to establish it as a standalone agency in its own right to give it more teeth.
Taoiseach Deputy Wallace.
Well, legislation until the cows come home, but until you start engaging in enforcement, it's a waste of time. You made an unfair comment, Taoiseach, saying that I would make a judgment before I actually read the report. No, I didn't, and I wouldn't accuse you of it. But what I would ask you to do, Taoiseach, I'll give you the judge's statement on the day, and read that, and then read the ODCE report, and you tell me, is this an organisation that ye should be reinforcing? Because that's what you're doing. You're ignoring what's happened. You're ignoring the fact that they've done a complete whitewash. They have covered up their own mistakes, and what they have had to say in that whitewash report bears no resemblance to what the judge had to say on that day back in May 17. There's no comparison, Taoiseach, so I would ask you to read it. Are you prepared to read it? I'll give it to you. And with regard to the, since you seem to have difficulty getting access to these reports, I would also ask Taoiseach, I mean, I can remember you saying that I do think that we need an examination as to how this all went wrong after the case and why those mistakes were made by the ODCE. That's a long time ago, Taoiseach, for a fellow that is interested in tackling white-collar crime.
I think, Deputy, we'll both agree that you need both legislation and enforcement, because you can only enforce the laws that exist. And if the laws are deficient or don't exist, obviously they can't be enforced. So it requires a combination of actions. Legislation, I've given you an example of some of the legislation that we've brought through just in the past year to crack down on white-collar crime. And we also need enforcement too. And we're doing that by beefing up and providing more resources for the ODCE. But yes, I acknowledge that the ODCE, notwithstanding the fact that it has had a number of very successful prosecutions in recent years, should have done a lot better when it comes to other prosecutions. And that's why it is our intention and our policy as a government to separate the ODCE from the department. It's currently an office of the department, and establish it as a standalone agency in its own right, a sort of National White-Collar Crime Bureau or an Irish version of the FBI when it comes to white-collar crime. And that's exactly what we intend to do. As regards that report, I haven't seen it, hasn't yet been brought to Cabinet. Obviously we'll read it before it goes to Cabinet, and we'll be happy to publish it and discuss it further with you.
Thank you, Taoiseach.